The father of the 3-year-old Holmen girl declared a homicide victim in her autopsy appears in court today. 30-year-old Dylan Barch and his girlfriend, 24-year-old Jamie Rundle, are charged with child abuse and neglect that resulted in the death of his daughter. A judge set a $2,500 cash bond for Barch today. Rundle was in court yesterday. The 3-year-old died 3 days after being taken to the hospital in October for a seizure. According to court documents, a medical examiner noticed the child was malnourished and had several injuries consistent with abuse, including the possibility the toddler was force-fed salt. The injuries were initially noticed by staff at a local hospital. Joining us now is Victor Veith, the senior director of the Gunderson National Child Protection Training Center in Winona. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
First, tell me about the work that the National Child Protection Center does.
We provide training to child protection professionals across the country, even the world. We train about 15,000 professionals a year. We consult on about 1,000 cases of child abuse a year and work with universities to better prepare tomorrow's professionals to recognize and respond to abuse.
So what are some of the first signs that professionals or even community members, neighbors, might notice if a child is being abused?
Well, in cases of neglect, it's something out of the ordinary. So you think of the child who's always unkempt, always has a body odor, who has a clear medical need that the parents seem unwilling to address. Something out of the ordinary with respect to neglect. With child abuse, it's a matter of paying attention to how children normally injure themselves. So at a very early age, children have a parachute reflex. Their little arms will go out when they fall down. So when it's an accidental injury, they skin their hands or their knees or the prominent bony portions to the front of their body. It's more unusual to injure your back because although you could fall backwards, it doesn't happen, or injuries to the side of your legs or your buttocks. Hand slap is usually just the imprint of a hand on the little boy or girl's face, so 2 or 3 linear lines. People who abuse a child often grab the ears. You'll get an injury behind the ear. So folks just begin to pay attention to how children normally injure themselves, and if they see any pattern that's outside that norm, that's suspicious.
What are some steps taken by a medical provider that might notice, a child might have been abused?
Sure. Well, if a report comes in, a medical provider would look at the injuries. They would listen to the history, that is, listen to mom or dad or the child if they're old enough to give a verbal account. How exactly did these injuries happen? And does that history make sense with the injuries? And of course, if they're still suspicious, they could do a thorough medical workup, which could include x-rays and CAT scans and blood being drawn and so on and so forth. Only really doctors can diagnose a case of neglect or abuse.
And do then medical providers do they have the obligation then to contact authorities, or how does that relationship work?
They absolutely have an obligation. They're mandated reporters, and in cases of child abuse and neglect, they're often critical witnesses for the government.
If a neighbor, if just someone in the community might notice some of the signs that you mentioned, what can we do to help that child?
Remember, the child's life may depend on you, and don't worry whether or not the child really is being abused. If you have a plausible suspicion, it is your moral obligation to make a call and let the authorities sort it out.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.